Okay, why don't we actually begin? Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the 2022 State of the College. Perhaps it's a little ironic that this is occurring on Groundhog Day. I was really truly hoping that we would be able to do this as a in-person event, and lo and behold, I find myself sitting in the same chair as I was last year, perhaps even wearing the same blue suit. But we have much to discuss, and in spite of a year in which a long shadow was cast by the COVID virus, we have really accomplished a great deal, and we have a very bright future ahead. I actually don't want to spend a lot of time on the virus itself, but I just wanted to give you a very quick update on where we are. And if you remember, when we actually published the administration's priorities for the current academic year, one of the key ones was to continue to protect the safety and well-being of our staff, students, faculty, and patients. We are, in fact, doing that. And what you see here is simply a quick overview of our booster profile. Certainly the entire internal community has become vaccinated, and we're now in the process of trying to ensure that everybody gets their booster in a timely manner. And so what you really see is that 76%, or over 3/4 of our community, have now received their booster. And actually, of those who are actually eligible for the booster, we're at over 85%. The numbers are there for faculty, residents, students, and staff. Deadlines are approaching, but I'm actually really pleased to see how well people have responded. And I think it's just a wonderful statement of the commitment of everybody within the community to ensuring everybody's safety and comfort. I'm not sure that there's much more that we could do as a community than we are already doing between the safety protocols that have been put into place and getting vaccinated. We also have the good news that when we look at the profile of New York City, although the number of cases really went up, quite high, they also came down quite rapidly. I took a look. This is actually data from today. And if you look at yesterday's profile, it actually turns out that we're just about where we were the last time we had an event. And that was, of course, the recognition ceremony and the holiday reception. And so, as you know, we're opening back up to events starting February 14th. And I'm sort of expecting that we'll be able to relax other restrictions quite quickly, or hopefully quite quickly thereafter as well. I always I was actually hoping never to have to use this slide after last year, but I brought it back. And that's just to give a call out and a thank you to everybody who's been a part of the COVID ERT, emergency response team. It's been a challenging year, and everybody has gone above and beyond the call of duty. And certainly thank you to Chris Gomez and to Mike McGovern for sort of their leadership, particularly on the vaccination process and helping to assure and answer everybody's questions. So with that, I actually want to start on a brighter note. And that is, it really hasn't been a bad year when we begin to look back. We're in the middle of our 50th anniversary. And I think probably the right thing to do is to simply say thank you to everybody, whether they've been here for 1 year or whether you've been here for 50 years. 50 years is quite a long time. And this college has established itself as a leader in optometric education and vision research. And it's not possible without the contributions of everybody within the institution, no matter what role you play. It does have an impact and a positive impact on the achievement of our mission. When I did a quick look at 2021, I was actually very surprised. I probably shouldn't have been, but quite surprised by some of the accomplishments. I have to say, as I did this, I actually left accreditation out. And then I realized that we got affirmation of accreditation only 6 months ago. We spent 2 years getting there, but it's amazing how quickly time passes and how quickly memories are erased, as you move on to new priorities and new agenda items. But we've worked hard to expand our commitment to certainly diversity, equity, and inclusion. And of course, we are continuing, and kudos to admissions and the admissions committee. We are still admitting highly qualified individuals. Even with the solid base, we're also seeing new accomplishments. Dr. Troilo, the faculty, the department chairs, the micro-credential program came to fruition with our first graduates, 16 graduates completing the micro-credentials program this past spring. Our ODMS program a year ago admitted 7, and just last month admitted 11. These are the largest numbers since 2013, and so clearly there's greater interest and enthusiasm for engaging in the research programs as well. Residencies, largest class ever accepted. Notably, I think you can look at the numbers on research, nearly 14 million in cumulative grants. And in terms of the research expenditures projected for this year at over 4.1 million, what I would share with you is that the business office has sort of affirmed that this is by far the highest level of activity in the history of the college. And that's, we also have a couple of grants pending that received very good scores in their review, and we're hopeful, optimistic that those will get funded. And so our research program, in spite of the challenges, whether it's basic translation or clinical research, is thriving. Growth appears to be sort of not only here, but on the horizon as well. Certainly a challenging area, I think, has been in the University Eye Center. Kudos in that they've rebounded to nearly 90% of patient visits and 94% of revenues. And that's, even, being in Midtown right now, where many workers have not returned since the onset of the pandemic. Tourism has been down, and so I'm actually quite pleased at the progress that was made and how quickly we came back. So the year has been good. So we're back, we're strong, and I think it's a time to sort of reflect on not just where we are, but where we're going, and what areas we're going to be putting our focus on as we proceed into the next year and in the years ahead. If we start looking at the first, and that is, for us to truly be successful, we have to restore our commitment to program excellence. Not restore it, but continue it. Education, research, patient care, that's the core of what we do. If those programs are not solid, if those programs are not excellent, our leadership position in optometric education and vision research is going to be threatened. So if we just look, and you've seen these kinds of slides and these kinds of metrics, and I'm going to go through them quickly. But certainly our admissions process has been sustaining the quantitative indicators. If you look at the GPAs, that little purple dotted line under SUNY is where we are this year. Last class admitted, again, we were in that top tier, with Ohio State, UC Berkeley, and so on, in terms of optometric admissions test scores in total science. We still are an institution of choice. We do see some degradation, this past year going from 63% to 61%. What this really means is that the students that we're offering admissions to are accepting our offer of admissions. We want to be the ones deciding who are the best students and who do we want to be a part of our community. It's hard to know how much the pandemic may have impacted the past couple of years in terms of those yields, but it's still fairly impressive. And notably, I recast this data a little bit to look at it as how are we compared to the national average? And if you look at the national average for yield as simply that blue line across the middle, our selectivity, not our selectivity, but our yield is 17% higher than the average institution on a nationwide basis. So we're actually at our highest level of separation from that national average, at least in the history of maintaining this data. Students are actually still doing fairly well, particularly if you look at part 1 and part 2 of our national boards. Very consistent. This past Friday, We did actually get the results from part 2 for the class of 2022 that took it in December with a 95% first-time pass rate. The ultimate pass rate in terms of having passed all parts at national board, you'll kind of see has been a little bit rocky. But again, it's hard to know whether that's something of a side effect of the pandemic. Monitoring it, I know certainly Dr. Troilo, Dr. Alvieri, faculty are working to make sure that our students have support so that they do pass these exams on the first time through. In terms of our programs, our formal programs, you can see that over the years, yes, we increased our enrollment of the ODs. That's now stabilized, but we continue to give MSs, PhDs. There's the Advanced Graduate Certificate in Optometric Business Management. And this year, we added the micro-credentials as well. And of course, residencies have continued to grow over time. And in the research program, I already pointed out and highlighted, that we're doing incredibly well. This data is actually from ASCO, and this is total research awards. And so for the 2021 fiscal year, we were at a little over 5.1 million in awards. That's different than what you expend. But we're up there certainly right with Indiana, and Berkeley is right now in the first position, but we are gaining ground. Dr. Bloomfield provided these numbers, or many of these numbers in that top graph. But the cumulative budget for fiscal year 22, you can see we hold in terms of total or cumulative budget over the years of the awards, we hold almost $14 million in research awards. That's up over $2 million from the prior year. And as I mentioned, we actually have, a couple of grants pending, which will have a significant impact in assuming we get funded. And again, that 4.1 million in expenditures, over 30% increase from the year before, and growing. And so again, congratulations to everybody involved in research at the college. I think it was an extraordinary year, and it looks like the next year may be just as remarkable as well. Patient census at the UEC, you can actually see this, of course, was the pandemic 2020 in the orange line, picking up over here in terms of the 2021 fiscal year, where it grew back in around October of 2020, actually. It came back to being a bit closer, lower than the pre-pandemic levels, but not far away. And sort of continued at that level and has continued and picked up this year as well. It's certainly my expectation and hope, that as we get past what we keep hoping is the last wave, of COVID, that as people return to offices and workers and employment picks up in the Midtown area, we will be back to and perhaps exceed pre-pandemic levels. Now, one of the things that often happens is we focus so much on the 42nd Street facility and the UEC, we often lose track of our impact in our network outside of the college campus itself. I want to say thank you certainly to Dr. Richard Soden, our Director of Healthcare Development. This year actually was the fruition, I think, of many years of work, expanding our relationship with New York City Health and Hospitals. Health and Hospitals is the largest urban public healthcare system in the country. It offers a remarkable opportunity for our students and for the college to serve very diverse populations and underserved populations throughout the city. We had relationships with 4 of these sites, and this year we've added 4 others to our contracts. Now, they don't have students in residence yet, but faculty are beginning to be assigned or hired for those roles. And so we've actually sort of doubled that footprint. And I think the relationship with H&H is incredibly promising in terms of the future. But that's also just one step, as we look outside. If we simply look at the 5 boroughs of New York, we have 6 residency sites. There are 19 externship sites, 16 satellites, and satellites are those that we have financial contracts with as well as educational, and 7 community partners. That's nearly 50 relationships, 50 sites just here in the 5 boroughs. And when we look beyond the 5 boroughs, all told, we have 99 sites, including 68 externships, 12 residencies, the 16 satellites, and the community partners. Our footprint, our network is extensive. And I think we often lose track and perhaps underappreciate the importance of this network to the college, but also to our students and our residents as they become educated and qualified as optometrists. So I feel very confident, and I hope everybody else does too, that the educational research and patient care programs of our college are solid. They are excellent, in terms of their quality, and that there is a strong foundation for the future. We do need to take care of them. We do need to protect them, and we do need to constantly evolve and change if we're going to maintain a leadership position. Which then brings me to some characteristics of, I think, a successful community. And that is a culture of innovation, always being able to plan, anticipate, and change, but also flexibility and adaptability, which is not all forces are within our control, and that we need to be able to respond and integrate and come out better than we were before. If we look at the concept of innovation, I don't think we're short of examples. These are a few, and a lot of it, one of the things that certainly characterizes SUNY, or I hope characterizes SUNY, is that we offer our students a lot of opportunities beyond the OD that can help differentiate them as providers and as optometrists or as researchers in, offering them these value-added opportunities. So quite innovative are things such as the MS residency and the PhD residency, the graduate certificate. Well, we've had it for a few years. I don't believe there's anything like it in the country. Our T35 program, the micro-credentials, quite new. Electives, residencies doing advanced competencies. And I guess the last one, obviously, career development is co-curricular. But again, it's trying to provide our students with access to the most contemporary learning opportunities that help them evolve professionally and personally. And it says beyond the OD, perhaps it should say before the OD, but C-STEP and the eye care camp that started last year are good examples, I think, of innovation that helps us bring in highly qualified and diverse applicants to the institution. And then flexibility, adaptability. Well, we've just been through 2 years of flexibility and adaptability. Whether it's shifting to remote learning modules, the virtual admissions process, certainly the diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging efforts, mental health programs, all of these are things that are good and important. And some of it was very intentional internally, but some of it was also a result of external forces. And an institution and a community that is willing to listen and willing to see and willing to respond will be stronger and more successful in the long run. So yes, we're back, we're strong. And the other element, and I've mentioned a couple of times, is a culture committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And obviously this has been a central topic of conversation. But I also want to bring the community back and remember that, much of our conversation is about the college community, the degree to which we embrace diversity, the degree to which people feel that they belong and are included in the community. But I also want to remind everybody that part of this is also developing our students as thoughtful, caring eye care providers who have the experience and who have the sensitivity and the cultural awareness to provide for everybody. no matter what kind of a community they come from, what their background is, what their socioeconomic level is, what their race is, what their ethnicity is. And so in trying to ensure that our own internal community is one that embraces DEI, everybody is a teacher of everybody else, and we're actually preparing our students to be better professionals as a result. And certainly when you think a little bit about the expansion of the relationship with health and hospitals and the communities that they serve, it's all quite complementary, and there's a lot of articulation there in terms of goals and purpose. Now, I think everybody knows, the Diversity Inclusion Master Plan was shared, by Dr. Harewood and Dr. Alberi, and requests for comments were due this past Friday. So they're in the final phases of, I think, dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And that should be ready for broad review, well, not broad review, but for final approval very shortly. And I'm looking forward to seeing the final product. And they have a mission and they have a number of goals. And I would encourage everybody, if you didn't read it or didn't comment, pick it up and read it. There's a lot of information, and I just want to share a couple of points from it related to the first goal, which is to increase the number of students and faculty from underrepresented minoritized communities. The top graphic I derived from data that was really in there, and it really sort of looked at broad categories in our distribution. And without going through it too finely, what you can really see is that when it comes to diversity, the faculty and the students, and we've known this for a while, and we're working on it, and we are making progress, particularly among the student body. If you look at the bottom graph, that is from the Diversity and Inclusion Master Plan, and perhaps it's actually better represented in the next slide, which is looking at our ability to diversify our student body, to attract underrepresented minority students to the college. And you can see there that it's been a steady progress, not as rapidly as some may like, but I think, again, the efforts of student affairs and admissions and the faculty who have been involved, are really moving this forward. The far right there is the year to date. Thank you to Dr. Alberto for giving me the latest data yesterday. This is year to date. We're ahead of last year, and it's likely to grow. And so what you can see there is simply the blue is the number of applications, the number accepted, and the number who have deposited to come in, which is at 12 at this point. And so just in closing on the diversity, equity, and inclusion, I just want to thank the committee members who are listed on this slide, by their assignments. But thanks so much for the time and energy you put in here. I know that it was really a effort, particularly with the climate survey and data to analyze. I know people spent a lot of time and were very thoughtful in their deliberations, and thank you for your review and your recommendations. So, of course, having excellent programs, having a proper culture, having a diverse community still requires resources. And so for us to move into the future, it's important to have a strong financial foundation, and it's important to have the infrastructure to support it. Now, I'm actually going to only share one slide financially this year because to some degree it gets to the bottom line, and that's our fund balances or our reserves. And you can see that at the end of fiscal year 2021, this past June, we had 19,102,000 plus in reserves. That was quite a change and a flip from 2020 when we were hit with the pandemic, where we basically plunged by $10 million. In between the state holding back on support, as well as losses of revenues from a variety of sources, we basically expended over half of our reserves maintaining operations. Good news is we bounced back, between spending, being careful with our spending as well as the state, beginning to loosening up at that point, what they had committed to us over time. We actually ended fiscal year 2021 just about where we were pre-pandemic. And so, while it's been a sacrifice and challenging, and I think a little, anxiety producing, we actually are in good shape. And I've shared this slide before. We try to make sure we have a minimum. It's really a expectation of SUNY system that campuses have at least 25% of their operating budget in reserve in case of emergency. We actually embrace a little more conservative position, caution, with 33%, and certainly, interestingly, the $10 million in FY20, we would not have had that if we were operating at the 25%. We would have been okay with that cautionary note. So this is an example of a true unanticipated crisis and being in a position to navigate it successfully. This year, we are projecting that we were spending about $1 million more than we would take in, knowing it would take some time to build back our revenues. 6 months in, our reserves were $18,825,000. The business office basically is projecting or suggesting that the original 18 million is probably a pretty good number. So we are on budget. We are on target. So we're financially strong. The next question is the infrastructure. And a couple of years ago, and I brought this up last year, but a couple of years ago, we did extensive examination of the campus and what our capacity was. And the real question for the Framework for the Future project was, what's the best long-term strategy for us to ensure stability and optimal educational and research environment from which to prepare doctors of optometry? And the real question was, if we were to continue to thrive and grow, is the footprint, is the capacity of 42nd Street the right place to be? The conclusion was that we are financially strong and that our campus can support an increase in existing programs, degree programs, research, and patient care. Obviously, this takes continued resources for us to build, but that became a big part of our thinking, as we began to think about the 18th floor, when system administration left and moved over to 55th Street. From a infrastructure standpoint, this has been a constant effort, and I think every college and university has to constantly update and upgrade in order to meet the needs of the time. And certainly you can see, going back over the last 10 years, we've built the student center, we've built out research laboratories, our lecture halls and teaching spaces, the library, the new laboratories in the lower lobby level, and the new pediatric clinic. Those all together, along with some of the stuff we don't see, like HVAC. We've spent probably just about $60 million in the last decade making sure that this facility was prepared not only for today, but for the future. And we need to continue that effort. We have now, we had originally hoped that some of these projects would occur 2 years ago. Money was held up and we've been waiting patiently, but in January, we finally got word that some of our key projects and what I think are transformational projects have now not only been approved, but provided with funding. And so the 7th floor, adult primary care floor, has been funded to the tune of $12.2+ million. And that will be a complete gut renovation. Many of our faculty and the clinical administration and staff worked on this very diligently for quite some time, only to be put into a patient waiting mode. But we are going to be good to go. That project will probably get underway in just about a year. And so we have plenty of things to do to prepare for that. Before that, we also got the funding for the Clinical Vision Research Center. And so the old teaching laboratories on 14, and you can sort of see them in their gutted glory, up there on the right, is basically funded to nearly $2.5 million. Hopefully that will be out to bid shortly, and the goal is to have this completed by the end of the calendar year, so by next December. Hopefully the CVRC will be moving into new digs with expanded capacity, both in terms of research, testing, and offices. So congratulations to that group, this, I hope, will allow the tremendous growth that we've seen in the CVRC to continue. So to Dr. Fry and her staff and the faculty who are engaged, congratulations, and enjoy your new digs. It won't be that much longer. I know you've been waiting patiently. We also have a proposal in the old biological and anatomy teaching labs up on 16. We've actually put in a proposal to a matching fund project up in Albany. For every dollar we contribute, system administration would contribute too. And so to renovate those laboratories and expand our translational research capabilities, would cost us about a little over $2 million. It would cost the college about $700,000, but we would get the balance from system. Not sure where that is. We're hopeful, but certainly Dr. Troilo, Dr. Bloomfield have spent years, I think, with a vision of research here that has got a significant critical mass and spans basic translational and clinical research. This would be a key domino in making that a reality, as is the new CVRC. And so, when we think about the framework for the future, increasing our research capacity and providing for growth, thanks to them for their leadership and to the research community that's worked on these things so hard. But it's just wonderful to see this kind of progress finally coming about. And so that brings me to strategic partnerships. One of the challenges of being a specialty institution or a specialized institution, sort of separated from other university resources, is you can get isolated. And in an era when interprofessional care and interprofessional education, is really an integral part of developing truly successful healthcare professionals, being a specialized institution does have a downside, which is why having partners becomes quite important. And in thinking about the expansion of our programming, we can do things ourselves, or we can look to partners to do it. The most recent one, and the press release just went out yesterday, although I think most of you are aware of it happening, is the agreement, the partnership with Downstate Health Sciences University School of Public Health. Their dean, Katad Demisi, is very enthusiastic about this. They are going to be occupying a part of the 18th floor, the south side suite, when you get off the elevators on the left. And they will be actually bringing in faculty both for educational purposes as well as research purposes, and establishing an extension site on our campus. I think this creates tremendous opportunities if we take advantage of it, for our students, for our faculty, for developing actually a public health research capacity, looking at optometry as a critical profession in population health, healthcare equity, and access. So they will be hopefully moving in beginning of the summer or around July. Their first program should be kicking off in August, and over the first year, there will be 3 master's programs offered up, an MPH in healthcare administration, and MS's in global health and clinical epidemiology. This can be good for certainly students, and we'll look at ways to create more integration. It can be good for our faculty who want to seek additional credentials, and perhaps maybe more importantly, want to get involved in public health research and help the college as it perhaps becomes a leader within the profession in looking at health policy issues. So that's quite exciting. But it's important to realize that, all of these relationships, today I've sort of focused on some, the expansion of health in hospitals. We have had a relationship, a very successful one, with Stony Brook School of Social Welfare for several years now. Again, the School of Public Health, Empire State, with our graduate certificate in business management and MBA program. But if you really start to map out all of the relationships that we have and how dependent we are on those relationships, it's quite remarkable. It doesn't matter whether we talk about education, patient care, research and graduate studies, or even pre-optometry. Our impact, our effectiveness as an institution and as a specialized institution has been made richer and will become even more impactful because of the relationships we have. There's very specifics, in certain areas of our programming. We obviously have always had a relationship with SUNY System, but Optometric Center of New York, our foundation, has been instrumental in providing very much needed resources. Our community partners, beyond what we have listed here, as well as some of our international collaborators, these relationships, I think, have been perhaps more critical in our success and will be more critical in our long-term success. And I think we need to protect those, care for those, cultivate those, and enhance their value to us and our value to them. So when I think about the precursors for success, and which is something you do, when you're celebrating 50 years old, I think the future is bright. I think we have, and we can check, put a check mark next to each of these items. We are prepared. We have the foundation. We have the character. We have the talent, and we can move forward with all due speed. Now, our strategic plan, as I begin to wind down my comments, our strategic plan is for 2018 to 2023. 2023 is right around the corner. Generally, we would begin to move into a new strategic planning cycle this fall. But in retrospect, and because of the number of variables, I'm not sure that that's completely necessary. Because as I look at it, yes, we are back, and I very much put in here and emphasize, and we are tired, but we are strong. And I truly do believe that as a college and as a community, we are at an inflection point in our history. Through innovation and a commitment to excellence, our educational research and patient care programs can have a bigger impact on the advancement of eye and vision care than ever. Do we need to go into a new strategic planning cycle right now? Here I look at the "and we're tired." I don't think so. We have a very strong plan. We've actually made significant progress on that plan, but that plan still holds largely true. Since we put that plan together, we've done the framework for the future and really kind of looked at the facility, infrastructure, and capacity issues and the room for growth here on 42nd Street. We've encountered the challenges and the barriers to progress represented by the COVID virus over a 2-year period of time. Our direction, is now also influenced more heavily by our renewed commitment, to diversity inclusion, and the diversity inclusion master plan needs to be looked at. But I've made the decision that rather than go through a major planning process at this point, I think we can modify our strategic plan and extend it out to 2025. And so I will be asking the leadership and the institutional research and planning committee to work on modifying Care Lead in Advance to extend its life by a couple of years, making modifications where necessary. And we will be sharing those proposed revisions, I hope, within the next 3 to 4 months with the community at large to gain additional input. And my hope is that certainly within 6 months at the latest, we will have a modified roadmap for the next several years. So with that, I want to thank you. It's been an incredible year, and we could not have done it without everybody pulling their fair share. We've often had staffing challenges. We've had some financial challenges. We've had pandemic and COVID challenges. But just thinking back to that earlier slide with what we accomplished in the past year, I think it's quite remarkable. Now, sadly, one of the side effects of the pandemic is we probably didn't really get to celebrate the 50th anniversary quite the way we really intended or wanted to over this past year. The 50th year is beginning to come to a close, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows we are giving it one more go, and to mark your calendars for April 14th for the Eyes of New York. We are combining actually with the students' eyeball. We're trying to make this as accessible and as big and loud a celebration as we possibly can. It's going to be at the Edison Ballroom over on 47th near 8th, or between 7th and 8th. I think a good time will be had by all. So I certainly invite you. More details will be forthcoming, from Dawn in the Institutional Advancement Office. They've done a fantastic job this past year, I think, navigating the virtual world when we really couldn't do much of what we wanted to do. But this is a last shot chance for us to celebrate in person with one another. So thank you.